Why should I read as a student teacher this chapter?
Why should you read this chapter as part of your course? Well, for me, I'm a primary school teacher in Ireland, and when I was going through teacher training college, I only wish we had a chapter on inclusive play. Our classrooms are hugely diverse educational settings, and for me, graduating and going into a school, I only wish I had some advice on how to set up an all-inclusive environment that promoted agency, student voice, and yeah. What about you?
Yeah. I think from an academical perspective, we have a tendency to focus on the formal functions in school and what happens in a more formalized setting, and especially free play and the play settings where children are left in a culture that they have to shape themselves in certain ways hasn't been given a lot of attention. So this is also a chapter where we're trying to give that more attention and trying to focus on inclusivity, not as a political standpoint, but also as a pedagogical tool, as a way of helping everyone in a play setting, and also as a way of making sure that children learn more, because if they are safe and are having a good time, then they will learn more in school as well.
I think also we're kind of, just to add to your point, we're breaking new ground here, or adding to the literature, because although literature on play is very substantial, literature on inclusive play is quite minimal. So I think by adding to that, we can add to the dialogue on inclusive play as well.
What is inclusive play?
That's a really good question. To first kind of understand what inclusive play is, if we break that apart and start off with, well, what is play? And if you go into the debate of what is play, then we could be here all day. Play, essentially, trying to find one succinct definition for play is like trying to find a needle in a haystack. There's a huge debate between scholars, theorists, practitioners, and parents throughout the world. It's a massive debate. But what is recognised and what is agreed upon is the learning potential rooted within play and within play-based learning. In terms of its complexities, rather than give one universal definition for play, contemporary literature draws on perspectives from complexities within play and play-based learning, such as the role of the teacher, how that's utilised, play and its content. We have how to incorporate different forms of play, such as inclusive play, and compatible assessments. But again, after all that there, what comes out the end is that play is routinely recognised by many as being the foundational stone of early childhood education. For example, and this is not limited to either, play contributes to the cognitive, social, physical, linguistic side of a child's being. I'll give you an example. If you take in a classroom setting, two kids are sat at a table and they're playing with building blocks. They're already forming that social side of their relationship because they're playing together. Once one child begins stacking blocks on top of each other, they're engaging with spatial awareness, using blocks, their own motor skills and physical ability to stack blocks. They're also looking at the names of the blocks and stacking up. So well, you have all that academic side of play, but also you have the emotional and the dispositions involved in play. The child is using persistence, concentration in building the blocks. And for example, if the child beside him decided, well, I don't want to build a tower anymore, and knocks down those blocks, then you're dealing with that resilience and also the motivation to continue building the tower again and again. So there's huge developmental stages involved within play and within play-based learning. Play it's not a new topic. It's been around for years. It's been around for centuries. Often in most primitive eras, storytelling and playing games outside and playing with toys has been around for years. And it's actually only recently that play has come into the fore as being recognised as having a huge learning potential for kids and for young kids in early childhood especially. Again, going back to that now, when we think on inclusive play, we as a team deliberated this quite strategically, because there isn't a huge amount of literature on inclusive play, but there's huge amounts of literature on play and inclusion. So it's forming those together to come up with our own revised, I suppose, definition of inclusive play. So we recognise that play is touted as being one of the most optimal learning experiences for children, for typically developing children. But what about our more diverse learners? Are they in the frame as well when it comes to inclusive play? So although I was challenged to find a description, for this purpose, inclusion refers to the social justice principle that all children from all backgrounds are entitled to access the school education system no matter what their background may be. So we wanted to create inclusive play setting that creates a culture of participation, first and foremost, where the multiplicity in students' voices and opinions are respected and valued. So as a team, we discussed inclusive play, and it was critical for us that inclusive play respects the sense of belonging that children need in the classroom, respects the sense of belonging with their peer group as well, as this helps children form a sense of identity and a positive sense of identity as well. From a parental perspective, you don't want your child feeling excluded in any way, shape or form. And from a teacher perspective as well, you want all the children in your class to access the school setting as well. So play needs to reflect difference. For example, again, I'm a primary school teacher in Ireland, and I can reflect on my own practice as well. I might have an autistic child who can't get to grips with timings and changing rules, so I might have a set of timers there, and that works for them. I might have a child who has English as a second language, and for them, drawing was a way of communicating. So that's me reflecting on my own practice and including them within the structure of play. Early childhood education is so important in being and creating an inclusive classroom and creating that culture of participation. So for establishing foundation in a child's well-being is well established in the general public as well as child development experts. So before children have the chance to form negative ideas about one another, we can step in and this is a prime time for learning about positive opinions and tolerance and respect for diversity. So again, once play values difference, it becomes inclusive.
Why can play be exclusionary?
Why can play be exclusionary? This is a very complex question. When we think about early childhood and how important early childhood is for the development of young children, in developing positive ideas about diversity and teaching children before they can form negative ideas about children from diverse backgrounds. So play often develops unconsciously between the majority, and thus it disadvantages the minority, such as children from these different cultures, different ethnic backgrounds, and different religions. One of the most important forces driving peer group play and formation appears to be similarity between children. Considerable evidence now exists to suggest that, similar to friendship choice, children from peer groups or cliques based on a variety of shared qualities and characteristics such as age, race, and socioeconomic status. So the result is often that children who are part of the normative group occupy high status positions or central roles in schools. For example, research suggests that children who come from a disabled background are less likely to form strong friendships in school early on. As a result, they can dominate the social scene at the expense of children who are different, and children who are different remain on the outside and remain marginalised in these educational settings.
What is the responsibility of the teacher?
Well, so one of the points that we're making in this kind of inclusive play area is that existing in a social capable way takes practice, and playfulness offers a way of practicing existing in a socially capable way. But if there's no teacher there to help structure and make sure that there's room for everyone to participate, there will be a differentiating way of who gets to practice what and who are given different kinds of social capabilities. Therefore, we would say that the phenomenon of practice and the phenomenon of play must be relative in some way. Obviously, as a child, you can step into any form of playground but there will be certain kinds of play fields that you cannot participate in if you don't know how to step into these play fields. And if you don't know how to step into this kind of activity, then you don't get to practice certain social skills that you will then need later on. That causes a discourse between levels of interacting with the world, really. I think to give an example, which might help to kind of narrow down what we mean, an example would be a child who appears in school for the first or second day, and then she tries to interact at the play field, but she doesn't really know how to do this, so she goes in, she finds her teacher and says, "I'm sad, I don't know how to find friends, I don't know how to interact with the other kids." And this makes it really clear what the teacher responsibility is, because the teacher can either say, "This is free play, the kids are handling it themselves, you will have to figure it out." If the teacher says this, then there is a challenge. The child can either figure it out, or maybe if they don't have any social capabilities or physical capabilities to do so, they can just miss that opportunity. Or the teacher can take responsibility for the position and help the child step into this social arena in some way. In inclusive play in general, there must be some sort of focus on the teacher responsibility, because if we think that play is a way to learn, which is the point that Dean just made, and if play is a way of doing inclusivity, then we should probably not leave that up to chance. That seems like a logical fallacy, at least, to say that children can probably figure this out themselves, because they are, in a lot of ways, still learning and practicing. Another point that comes to mind now is that children need a safe space and a place where they can practice freely, because if you need to practice anything, you need first to feel safe, secure, and able to fail without getting ridiculed. And that must also be a teacher responsibility, to set up a place where I can, as a child, practice my social skills and interaction with other children without fear of getting ridiculed and without fear of this interfering with how I can interact with the rest of the world. So I think a point, which is also a point that we're making in the chapter, that is very clear to me at least, is that in order for teachers to take their responsibility seriously, we need to understand that there are certain things that children learn in school. Those are math, language, geography, all the other things that you're learning in school, but they are also social interactions, they are also ethics and morals, they are how to and who to interact with, and they are also simple positions of inclusivity. The way the world is developing, it is foremost a democratic and ethical question, but inclusivity is also a question of necessity, because we have more and more people in our schools today who are all kinds of colors and shapes and sizes, and that is magical and amazing, but it also means that the teachers have more responsibility to look for inclusive ways of having children play with each other.
What approach can a teacher take in order to promote inclusive play?
Well, so without wanting to set up specific rules and regulations for what a teacher could do, because if we do this, then we make a checklist. If you do this and if you do this, you are inclusive. Maybe if we try and broaden out what kind of approaches can a teacher take, it should come down to probably 4 rules. And the first rule should be that you should always make sure, first and foremost, that the place that the child is safe and secure for them, and that they can be in a position of vulnerability without feeling that they will be prosecuted for this or that it will harm them in a further approach in their life. There is a clear distinction between the child who starves because they have no access to food and the child who decided not to eat for a day. And the first step must be for any form of teacher to make sure that the room is not a place, or the playground or the class or whatever is not a place where any child is starving for normal personal things. so that the child is always physically able to be there, that the child is always feeling without stress and not in fear of what can happen, and that the child generally sees themselves as valuable in the room. Then the second step must be to try and interact with the kind of culture that the children already have. Try and, we call it the detective role, try and step in and figure out what is already happening in the children's environment. What are they focusing on? What are they playing? What are the narratives that already exist? And how can we expand upon these and make room for an inclusive play environment? Being the detective, going to try and explore these kind of rooms means to do it without your own bias and your own judgment, and trying to figure out what is already happening in the children's culture and how can we expand upon this. Then the third role, as I see it or as we see it, should be to be the trainer, the coach, the one who sets up different minor scenarios or different conversations where we can talk about social skills, we can train and practice. And practicing should also be practicing, okay, so how are we bad friends, or what happens if someone becomes sad, or it should open up for all kinds of different scenarios that is involving the children in the life that they already have. It wouldn't make sense that I set up a practice course for a lot of children that are about blind children if there are no blind children in the classroom. So it should always be practicing a social field that is aware of where the children are at the moment and what makes sense in the social circle that they're in. Then at some point, when the children feel like they've got social skills for this and they are capable of stepping into the environment they're already at, you can expand upon it and start asking the questions of, okay, if someone entered into our classroom and was blind, how could we change our games so that we could include someone who was blind, or so we could include someone who might not speak our language, or other things that could happen in the classroom but might not be available at the moment. And then the fourth role, as we see it, is actually for the teacher to be participating in children's game. So one of the issues that can happen when children are playing is that they are always given free space, but they might not have the capabilities of playing in that free space. And because adults seem to have some sort of fear for participating, I think that was the first word we wrote when we were talking about the teacher role, was the fear of participating in the children's play area, and the fear of stepping into children's play because we don't want to corrupt it or destroy it with adult thoughts, or maybe we don't want them to look at us as an idiot or whatever it is. That means we're also distancing ourselves from children's play. So the fourth step should probably be to participate in children's play and actually figure out what is happening, so that I can be part of that culture, understand the small narratives, but also provide with my position as a role model as a teacher, without control, but within the narrative we're creating together.